The Wisconsin Badgers said they would spend in the portal. They would put the resources into the program. And apparently they did. And apparently there's some college football teams that noticed.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of the community. Thank you for being an everydayer. Thank you for making this your first listen. And honestly, just thank you for being who you are. I'm your host, Ryan Harings, again, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on NBA futures and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Today's episode, have I been too hard on John Blackwell? Got some comments there. Let's talk about it. How high can the Badgers get in the seed rankings? Let's actually break it down, what winning out might mean for this Wisconsin team. How low could they get if they stumble? But first, let's talk big spenders. Let's talk ROI. Let's talk the portal. Interesting quote that came out today, yesterday-ish. Pete Nakos, who writes for On3, he's a really important guy in their kind of On3 ecosystem. He was speaking to a bunch of different NIL operators in different conferences. This was an interesting quote that came out from an ACC team who told them Wisconsin consistently won bidding wars for the players they pursued in the portal. Here's the money quote. I'll put it up on the screen so you guys can see it. Guys and gals can see it. Quote, I don't know if they spent the most, but certainly Wisconsin surprised some people. The ACC source told On3, they told us at least 4 or 5 kids we were involved with that said, if you go to Wisconsin, just give us a chance. We will be your highest number. I'm going to throw that quote up on the screen too so everyone can kind of see it. Okay, so let's break this down. Let's break this down a little bit. If I can see if I can multitask and throw this quote up at the same time. I can't, so I'm not going to stress it. So ACC source said Wisconsin surprised people. Multiple kids said, essentially, Wisconsin told them, just come talk to us. We'll be your highest offer. Off the gut, who are those players? It feels like guys like Colton Joseph to me. Makes a ton of sense. Bryce West makes a ton of sense. A guy like Austin Kowecki. Maybe a guy like a Abu Sama, Zion Kearney, Javon Robinson, Lionel Simmons, the offensive tackle that still has a lot of pedigree. Did I mention Kai Bates, Marvin Burks Jr.? You know, I would say the players that signed early are probably a lot of the guys, and I know Kearney signed a little bit later, but a lot of those guys that signed early, it felt like the Badgers were aggressive on them. They spent money on them, and you know, you definitely see other programs taking notice. So a couple things that I want to hit on coming out of this. The first is, okay, you build, and it's so funny. I was talking to my son today about accountability, and he wasn't cleaning his fish tank. He's young. But I said, listen, if you're going to get a fish, you said you would do this. Accountability matters in life. You know, do what you say you're going to do. And the athletic department, Chris McIntosh on down, said, we're going to put money into this program. We're going to put resources into this program and treat it at the level of which other schools in the Big Ten are doing it, right? We're going to make that investment. And there was a lot, let's be honest, there was a lot of, I don't want to say snickering, but there were a lot of people that pushed back and said, I don't believe you. There were a lot of people that said, I'll believe it when I see it. And then you saw what happened in the portal. It certainly made sense that, sorry, I got a text on the side. It certainly made sense that, you know, they spent money, but then now you're seeing people talk about it, programs talk about it, On3 talking about it. I got multiple texts today from people that cover other teams that are in the media sphere, and a couple of them were just like, Wisconsin was surprising people. Really? That's awesome. Good for you. Speaking to me as a Wisconsin fan, it's a big deal. You know, the resources are real, and we've seen confirmation of that. Now that it gets into the question now of ROI. So now that money has been put in the program, what do you need to see from an ROI standpoint? Return on investment, ROI. What does Luke Fickell need to do? What does this program need to show this year? Because people aren't generally going to keep giving money to things that don't work. I'm not going to say always. You know, certainly we keep giving our money to the government, and sometimes that doesn't work. You know, certainly I keep giving my money to, I don't know. I have been a victim of many things. I'm a trusting person. Never Nigerian princes, though. I've never done that one. But I will say this, like, now you need an ROI. Now you need return on investment, because otherwise people are going to stop giving money and donating money. What does that look like? What does this team need to look like this year for those donors, for that NIL arm, for those wealthy people who donated to the program, that stepped it up, for all of this to work and people not have eggs on their face? What does it need to look like? I think I've gone back and forth on this. I've said 7 wins. I've said 6 wins, get to a bowl game, beat Minnesota. I think it needs to look like a couple things. If you're going to, at the end of this year, be able to take a breath and say, okay, it felt like, and we can definitely make an argument if any money spent in NIL and college sports is good money spent, but money's being spent. So holistically, let's take a look at it and say, this felt like good money spent. I think at the end of the year, you need to have 7 wins going to a bowl to win 8, or you need to get 8 in the regular season. I think that's what it is. I think you got to get 8. I think you got to win 8 games. I think you have to win 8 games and you have to put something in the trophy case. And if you don't do that, I don't think you're going to look back at this investment that we have talked about, that we've seen, that other programs are now kind of talking anonymously about. I don't think you're going to look back and say it's worth it. And if that's the case, you may not get that same level of investment next year, because people aren't going to keep giving money to things that don't work, is what it is. 8 wins. Don't get embarrassed. The Iowa game last year was embarrassing. The Maryland game last year was embarrassing. Those were embarrassing games to be at. I was at both of them. Super fun. It was great to hang out with the guys, and Camp Randall's always incredible. Madison's always amazing. The food is immaculate, right? All those things, the beer was flowing, but those games were brutal. They were embarrassing, and you can't spend a lot more money, go all in, at least all in the sense of what Wisconsin can do. You can't do that and have an Iowa game this year. Doesn't mean you have to beat Iowa, but it's got to be a 4-quarter game. Iowa has to come out of that game. Iowa came out of the game last year mocking Wisconsin. It was embarrassing. They have to come out of this game this year with bruises. Legitimate bruises, not dirty plays, but they got to come out of this game feeling Wisconsin. When you got to beat Minnesota, and then you got to get 6 other wins, and then you got to go to a bowl game. And you need a little bit of proof of concept. You need a little bit of proof of concept that this offense works, that Grimes works, that Mateos is actually the right offensive line coach, that receivers can come here and not die on the vine like a plant that hasn't been watered. You need proof of concept, and that's your ROI. It's 8 wins, and it's an offense that looks like it makes sense. If you do that, I think you get a solid return on this investment, and then it keeps hopefully compounding and growing and stepping up. I think that's what you got to do. Dominique, good friend of the show, says 8 games with this schedule should be a minimum. I think so too, man. I've gone back and forth with this. What I think isn't necessarily what the school's going to think, what Chris McIntosh is going to think, what the people who donated money think. I think you got to get 8 with this schedule. You are ducking. Ducking's the wrong word, because it's not Wisconsin's fault. Wisconsin's not ducking anybody. Hell, Wisconsin hasn't ducked anybody for a while. We've had the hardest schedule forever, but you're not playing Ohio State. You're getting a Penn State with a first-year coach. You don't got Michigan. You don't got Oregon. You don't have Indiana, recent powerhouse. Wonderful for them. I think 8 games is the minimum. I agree with you, Dominique. Will Hanna, awesome dude, says if they get solid O-line play, good quarterback play, 7 wins is a no-brainer. I agree. What is Vegas going to set the over-under on this team? I'm fascinated actually to see it. 6.5? That feels like the number. And for the 4th year in a row, I'm going to take the over. Gosh, help me. But that 6.5, 7, got to be. I don't think they'll set it at 7.5. But I think it's 6.5, and it's got to be the over. All right, we're going to take a second there. Friends of the show, we're going to come back and talk about why this Badgers team could get to a 4 or 5 seed, what they need to do to get there, but what they need to avoid doing to drop. Seedings are critically important. We're going to talk about all the paths to get to a higher seed next on Locked On Badgers. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. First, a quick break for our friends of the show. And let me tell you about our friends of the show over at FanDuel, longtime partners of the show. And they have an incredible opportunity right now. with the NBA Finals starting to slowly creep up, if you ever wanted to take anybody to the NBA Finals, then FanDuel's giving you the chance to do that. Turn that dream into a reality. Imagine how much fun that would be. NBA sweepstakes, NBA Finals. Here's how it works. You're going to use your profit boost on any NBA future, right? And you'll automatically be entered into a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience, incredible stuff. And if you're already kind of looking at that board, seeing what's coming up on the futures, there's a lot of teams that can make deep runs. It's a perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of the year because it adds a little excitement to everything that's going on. Winter can be long. Use futures to spice it up a little bit. And now not only can your pick generate some cash, it can also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Today's episode also brought to you by our incredible friends over at TurboTax, a partner that I've talked about, a partner that I've used. Taxes can be all-encompassing. They can be stressful. They can be annoying. They can be tough. Taxes can take over your life. Don't let that happen. Let TurboTax come in, make it easier than ever to hand those things off and then move on with the rest of your day. And listen, between you and me, you don't got to tell me what the rest of your day looks like. Maybe it's playing Axis and Allies with your buddies in a bar. Maybe it's going to the bar and just having a nice pint by yourself, whatever it is. Enjoy that instead of doing all the tax work. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have taxes done by a local trusted expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150, all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just get it in by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate, get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, let's talk seeding. Let's talk seeding. Let's talk hoops. Let's talk Nick Boyd. So where can this team get? How high can they get? How low can they get? So when you look at what they've done, let's start here. Let's start big picture where they're at right now. If you look across, there's a seeding aggregating site. I forget what it's called, but it averages out a lot of the brackets that are out there now. They have the Badgers at roughly a 6.6 seed is what I saw just recently before I recorded the show. So the consensus right now is they're a 6 to a 7, somewhere in that seeding range. That feels accurate to me. That feels about where they should be when you factor in some of the early season struggles, some of the big wins. The net has them at 32 right now, I believe. So right around that 6-7 line. That's where they're at right now. So full stop. They're in a good spot right now. Okay. About a 6, I think, is where they would end up if the regions were picked today. What's next? You have 4 games left. Okay. At Washington, at Purdue, at Oregon, and then you have a home game to Maryland. Well, it's Washington, Oregon, Purdue. Purdue's the last game. Sorry. My thing is out of order here. But you got Washington, Oregon, Maryland, and then away game at Purdue. What do you got to do in that last chunk? If you want to climb the seeding ranks, climb up one more tier, one more spot, get to a 5, get to maybe even a 4, a couple things you have to do. You have to beat Washington and Oregon. Washington is a quad 1 win. Okay, because it's a home game for them. It's a road game for us. They're a top 75 team. That's another quad 1 win. Quad 1s are one of the biggest levers really to push you up a line. Okay, you get those quad 1s, you can push up a line or another line. So you got to get Washington. If we're talking about maybe turning this 6 into a 5 seed, you got to get Washington. That's a quad 1 win. That's a big deal. Washington you can get too. That's a team that you should beat. It's a late tip. Oregon as well. You can't drop that one. Oregon is a tricky one coming up tomorrow. That's one where they're not playing well. You can't drop it. Okay. So you got to beat Washington to get the quad 1. And then Oregon and Maryland are the landmines you can't lose to. Maryland specifically at home would be a terrible loss. Those are the ones you can't lose to. So you got to take care of business against these teams if you want to bump up a spot. If you want to bump up a line, you got to get that quad 1 on the road against Washington. You can't drop the basket against Oregon, right? Which is a late start. I think it's a 10 Central start time out there on the West Coast. That's a tricky spot, right? It's a road game. They haven't been great this year. Easy to overlook. It's a late start. You got to take care of business against Oregon, take care of business against Washington, and then not drop a really winnable home game against Maryland. You do those 3 things, I think you're up on a 5 spot. You're on the 5 line, I think, if you do those 3 things. And then if you happen to beat Purdue, if you can finish that off, that's another big quad 1 win. I think that would get you to the 4 if you had some success in the tournament. That is the upper ceiling. I think the realistic ceiling is a 5. Now, you go to Oregon tomorrow, you drop that one. You don't take care of your business against Washington. It's a tricky West Coast trip. You go home, beat Maryland maybe, and then lose to Purdue. You end the season losing 3 of 4, including 2 teams you should probably beat in Washington, Oregon. I think you're dropping back down to an 8 or 9. It is what it is. So take care of business. Get another quad. You have 2 more opportunities for quad 1 wins, and I think Oregon would be a quad 2. So you have more opportunities here to take care of business, but you got to take care of business against the teams that, quite frankly, this Badgers team has played down to at times. Is anybody in the chat, like if you're in the comments, is anybody in the chat incredibly confident that this team is going to not play down to the level of their opponents on the road when they've done it kind of consistently, road and home? Got to take care of business, guys. It's a big, big stretch of games here to improve the seeding. Let's see. Hooger said, don't say 6-7, Ryan. The kids are going to come out. Yeah. Hooger says probably a 5 or 6. Will Hanna, highest is a 4, lowest would be an 8 or 9. I agree with that. I think that's dead on. I think they can get to a 4 if you win out, and I think there's maybe even a chance if you win out and have a tight game against Purdue and then win 1 or 2 games in the Big Ten tournament. I think that would require a few other teams losing. It would probably require Washington and Oregon to keep winning to improve your wins against them, assuming you get them. There's some external things that have to happen for you to get to a 4. But I think the Badgers can get there if you take care of business and you lose a close one to Purdue. If you get smoked by Purdue or if you get beat by Purdue and you also drop the Washington game, I think you're locking yourself into a 5 or 6 probably. And if you really stumble down the stretch, you can drop back down to an 8 or 9. I think Will is completely dead on now with that one. Hooger does say, I think guard will get the boys up. I might be wrong though. I keep saying this. I don't think it's a guard thing. And I know people disagree with that, and that's great. Like disagreements are, we welcome all disagreements on the show. I think disagreements are incredible, but I think it's a player thing. And I'll go back to a quote. I know I've said it on the show before, but I was at a coaching clinic once, and the coach that was presenting said, we tell our players, I can coach your effort or I can coach your technique. I can coach how hard you work, or I can coach how we're going to match up with this team. I can't do both. And I think it's on the players to BYOE, bring your own energy. And it's on the coaches to put those players, those chess pieces in the best spot. Now, there's always gray area, right? There are coaches who are incredible motivators and they get their players primed and ready to go, maybe a little bit better than others. But ultimately, you have a senior Nick Boyd, you have a junior Blackwell, a junior Nolan Winter, you have Austin Rapp, who's played a year of ball, Braden Carrington, who's a senior. Those guys just need to bring it. And they should not need a coach to get them going. Maybe they do. Maybe that's part of the flaw of this team. Maybe that's something inherent in this team that is problematic. But I just struggle thinking a coach needs to get guys going like that. Mitch says he agrees. Michael says, I think we have a chance to win the Big Ten tournament if things go our way. I think we could, Mike. I'm curious if people want that. To be completely honest, I know before I've talked about this, the Big Ten tournament, how I value it, where I put it in my hierarchy of things I like, enjoy, and quite frankly, think are important. The Big Ten tournament is pretty far down on me. And I've said this multiple times, and I've had people definitely push back on this and not like this take, and that's fair. It's a completely fair to not like what I'm about to say. There's a part of me that always wants us just to lose right away in the Big Ten tournament. As long as we're in the tournament solidly. Let me caveat that. Like if we need a couple wins to get in the tournament, I am all about it. But there's a part of me that just wants to be fresh for March. March Madness. There's a part of me that doesn't want to take any risk on physical games in the Big Ten tournament where your guys are going to get banged up, maybe turn an ankle. I want this team fully locked in, ready to go for the Big Ten tournament. And for March Madness, for the real tournament. And the Big Ten tournament just kind of scares me in that sense, because I don't think it helps you much in seeding. I don't think winning 1 or 2 necessarily gives you a big bump. And I would rather, especially for a team that isn't that deep, for a guy like Nolan Winter, who's played a ton of minutes, I just would almost rather have the longer break. But again, I know some people don't like that take. Okay. Dominique says best case scenario in the Big Ten tournament is that you lose a close game to a good team on a BS call in the semis or quarters to get ready for the tournament. I'm down with that. Dominique, yes. I'm down with that take. Like, I don't want to lose the first game, but win your first game and then oops, we lost on a horrific reffing call. Now we get to go home and rest and ice up while the rest of the Big Ten beats themselves to death. I'm good with that. Hooger says, down for me too. I don't care about a solid Big Ten tourney run. I want that March Madness run. I agree. I mean, I couldn't say it any better myself. All right, let's take a quick second here for our friends of the show. We got to talk about, I got some pushback on my John Blackwell criticism from the last game. Several people actually, and let's get into it. Because again, we're going to put disagreements up on this show because I think it's worth talking about disagreements. So let's put them up here. Am I too hard on John Blackwell? Was I too hard on John Blackwell? Let's talk about that next. Locked On Badgers. First, a quick second for our friends of the show. Quick second, as always, say thank you.
I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. South Carolina rolled past Ole Miss 85-48 to clinch a share of the SEC regular season title and lock down the number 1 seed in the conference tournament. The Gamecocks extended their win streak over Ole Miss to 21 straight. UCLA dominated Wisconsin 80-60 to secure its first outright Big Ten regular season championship in program history. The Bruins improved to 27-1 overall and remain unbeaten in conference play. And number 12 TCU stormed back from a 13-point fourth quarter deficit to beat Iowa State 80-73. The Horned Frogs now sit alone atop the Big 12 standings and are 1 win away from clinching another regular season conference crown. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Today's episode also brought to you by our great friends over at Indeed. It can be hard in business, right? You have workplace drama, you have inboxes overflowing, you have projects you got to finish, you got all these things going on. And meanwhile, you still got to hire the right person. And that person's out there somewhere, but it can be hard. It can be finding that needle in a haystack. That's where Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in, helps you get the right candidates into the door, find what you're looking for, skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right dude or dudette, stumbles across your job post. It's being proactive. Proactive's great. Let's be proactive to fill our job needs. And here's a stat that says it all. We love stats here. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed. In the minute we've been talking, that's the Eddie George jersey number of hires. That's incredible, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all the boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. If you need to find the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get your premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on the podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. All right, let's do some comments here. So last game, I was critical of John Blackwell a little bit. I was critical of the first half. I didn't think he played as well as he needed to. He finished with, I think, 13 points, 8 of 8 from the free throw line. To be fair, several of those free throws kind of came late. Doesn't mean they don't count, right? I'm not trying to qualify anything, but it was a pretty negligible. Oh man, I mispronounced that word. I hate when I try to pull a word out in my brain in the middle of a live show and I can't quite pronounce it. But it was a minimal impact game for John Blackwell. I'll say that, especially in the first half when that game was still being decided. My frustration with Blackwell, and I've talked about it, it felt like he didn't play as hard as he needed to. It offensively, defensively, it felt like he was settling on offense a little bit. And then defensively, I thought he was getting beat out the dribble by guys that, quite frankly, are less athletic than he is. That was just me being honest. And it comes from a spot where I'll just tell you right here. Here's one of the comments I got on the last show. Disagree on the Blackwell takes. Big assumptions being made there. Here's another one. This is from T-Temp. He said, how about He said the JB take is absolute silliness. The work ethic, effort, discipline, and loyalty deserve better. Be better. And he's telling me to be better. He's saying that's a bad take. JB deserves better. And then he tells me to be better. And that's from T-Temp. And again, like, I love all the comments. I love disagreements. I would just say this. I have incredibly high expectations for Blackwell because I think he's a stud. I think he's tremendous. And when I see a half in the first half where I feel like he's settling, where I feel like maybe some fouls, maybe some offensive issues are getting in his head and it's impacting his effort defensively, I don't know how else to say that. And this comes from a spot where this team needs John Blackwell. It needs a very good version of John Blackwell to make a deep run in March, period. There's nobody else on the team that can give you what Blackwell gives you. He's averaging 18 a game this year. You know, he's shooting in the mid 30% from threes. He's had some absolute heaters. We don't win some of those games against Minnesota or, certainly Illinois without him. He scored 20-something against Michigan State. He's tremendous. But because he's tremendous, the standard has been set, right? The expectations have been set. He plays to a different set of expectations than anyone else on the team outside of Nick Boyd. And when you don't hit those, we're going to talk about it. And I don't think it was necessarily unfair. I don't think he played a good first half. I don't. Personally, I'm not one. I didn't say he pouted or anything like that. I think other people have thrown that out there. I don't think that's the case. I don't think he's necessarily sulking or pouting or anything like that. But it just feels like sometimes offensive fouls or fouls get in his head and he disengages a little bit. It's like the scene, I've referenced this before too. It's like the scene in Top Gun where Maverick disengages and Iceman is just in the dogfight and Iceman's Nick Boyd and he's fighting off 7 MiGs by himself. He needs Maverick to re-engage. He needs John Blackwell to re-engage. And by the way, eventually Maverick re-engages and they beat the Russians. I don't actually know if we're fighting the Russians in Top Gun, but to me, that's what it feels like. It feels like at times Blackwell just disengages a little bit. And then when he re-engages, he's tremendous. He's a closer. He's a second half guy. He's done it multiple times this season. He's hit big shots. But I think you need it just a tick more consistently at times. I don't know. I could be wrong, though. I'm wrong often. But that is just my take on it. Jagavi says negative Ghost Rider. The pattern is full. I use that on my kid. He's like, he's never seen Top Gun. He'll ask for something like negative Ghost Rider. That pattern's full. And my kid's like, huh? J. Rob Hanna says JB will win us a game in March time and we'll all forget. Yeah, he absolutely could. Right? He absolutely could. JB is a stud. He's a star. Like there's just certain times where it feels a little inconsistent, but there's no doubting the talent level or what he means to this team or what he can do in March. This team, with both of those guys rolling and Nolan Winter, is tremendously dangerous in March. But you need all those pieces clicking. It can't be a half of Blackwell or half of Winter or half of Nick Boyd. You got to have all of them locked in for March. And we haven't seen that consistently. Mitch says, I love JB when he's going all out. Thank you, Hooger. This is the word I was trying to say. Negligible. Thank you. I appreciate it. Jagavi says it's a long season and it's hard to be consistent game in and game out. I hear that. I don't. So here's what I'd say. This is a good point. Listen, I don't expect consistent 18 points every game. I don't expect consistent 40% from 3. I don't expect consistent 5 rebounds a game. I expect consistent effort, though. Right? And I don't want to question effort. I don't. That's not what I'm trying to do. But and that's not just a Blackwell thing. I think this team has in multiple times this season struggled with effort and intensity level. I think that is maybe a frustrating part for me because I think that is something you can control. Now, it's the very rare teams that never have an off game. It's the very rare teams that have the energy at a certain requisite level every single moment of the season. That's a lot to expect of anybody, but I think there's been a few too many of those moments this season for the Badgers. It's led to some inconsistency. Whereas if they've been locked in the entire season, I think you win a couple more games and you're probably now talking about battling for a 2 seed or a 3 seed. It is what it is, right? I don't want to belabor this point too much, but that is where I'm at on that one. I had this question too, really quickly to shift gears. I got a question. What is the best portal football player in the first 3 years? That was from one of the YouTube comments. I think it's got to be Mason Reiger, right? I mean, is there anybody else? And guys, we got a group of you in the chat right now, and I appreciate that because it's late. The first name that pops out is got to be Mason Reiger. Potentially. I mean, maybe does Will Pauling get in that conversation? Gosh, like who I don't know who else. I'm sure I'm missing somebody. It's not going to be a quarterback, I'll tell you that. Yeah, I think it's got to be Reiger, and Will Pauling to me feels like a close second. He was tremendous his first year. Hooger, Nizier's a good call. Nizier's in the combo. I don't think I would tier him above Reiger for sure, but yeah, Nizier was great for the Badgers, and I think he would have been tremendous this last year. Okay, let's wrap there. Dominique says Reiger, Pauling, Nizier. Oh, Hooger says the Top Gun scene is based off the real life Gulf of Sidra incident where we fought Libyans which were flying Russian MiGs. I love that. What planes were we flying? Were we flying like F-15s? No, Gulf of Sidra. What year is that? Was that F-4s? What kind of MiGs were they flying? So yeah, we could do a whole show on this. Let's do locked on dogfights. Let's do it. Tomcats. So the F-14s. Okay. Awesome. I am not familiar with that incident. Going to Wikipedia after this. On Wisconsin, really do appreciate everybody tuning in. When you're done here, definitely go check out. Thanks for tuning in. We have a all everydayer program right now. So if you're already watching Locked On Badgers, you can get Locked On Badgers ad free. So you're able to access some of this content. There's a Locked On Discord that's kind of members only, ad free content. So if you're already doing this, you can find the link to the Everydayer program in the show notes. Go check that out as well. On Wisconsin, as basketball 82940 says, on Wisconsin, and we will definitely talk to you guys tomorrow. Big game. All right, let's wrap it there. And I appreciate all you guys.